Last year I was portraying my grandfather, Frank Shaver. He's back here somewhere. Yeah, old guffer. And this year, that was a lot easier doing Grandpa Hurt than it is doing this great-grandpa, because I knew Frank Hurt. He was 84 when I died, and when he died, and I was 20, I guess, or something like that. So I had some interaction with him, and Grandma Bessie Simmons over the years. But Andre died in 1909, 25 years before I was born. In fact, my dad, who was Andre's oldest grandson, was only 6 when Andre passed. I do not remember any family talk about Andre, either from my grandparents. So today I'm starting in a generation before Andre in order to set the scene for how this branch of the Simmons family came to Richmond. I've included some quotes verbatim from newspaper articles of the time because I love the archaic use of the English language that they contain. Long sentences, repetitive words. As you will hear, the reporters must have had it in for rich, retired, prominent farmers and his children. Wesley and Mary left Genesee County in western New York to seek a new life in Michigan. They came to Columbus Township. Probably only the 3rd family to settle in Columbus Township. At that time, it was up the trees. Charles was born in Schoharie County, New York, which is near Albany and Syracuse on the east side of upper New York. And when he was 15, they moved to Middleburg in Genesee County, which was near Batavia, just east of Buffalo. At 22, he married Leah Stevenson. He first came to Michigan with his brother-in-law, David Weeks, and somebody will have to tell me how that relates to the Weekses, but it was his brother-in-law. They arrived earlier, cleared some timberland, cut trees, cleared land, and built a primitive cabin, which was accessible only by a footpath that they had created through the woods. It was thought that this took place in the area of Pound and Kroner Roads, which I think is real close to Gratiot. And the question in my mind was Gratiot there at the time because it would have been called Fort Gratiot Turnpike, I think. And in any event, the cabin was built, and Charles somehow acquired an 80-acre parcel in that area. After they moved, 2 more children were born to Charles and Leah, Andre in 1841, and James. And James was the ancestor of Jess Simmons, who lived in Armada, that clan. Charles farmed the property for many years, but eventually moved to Richmond, where he died in 1887. A grand sum of $1,500.
Oh my God.
Today you probably couldn't buy a lot anywhere near that. The Simmons men were known for their prowess with axe and hatchet. However, occasionally a mishap occurred. On November 29, 1887, the Port Huron Times-Herald reported in its unique English as follows. Charles Simmons, one of the pioneers of Richmond, was found dead in his dooryard about dusk on Monday last, where he had fallen in an apoplectic fit while engaged in splitting wood. That's one sentence. He was found by his wife, who had been to attend a funeral, and on her return, finding the house rather cold, went out to the woodpile where her husband had been engaged and found him lying still and lifeless where he had evidently lain for some time. Eight-line paragraph with 2 sentences. Andre became a businessman and an entrepreneur as well as a farmer and a dealer in livestock. I did find one article about his dealing in livestock. He sold an 8-month-old calf for $700 or something like that. But it was hard to find out anything about these people when you didn't know them, and the news was kind of odd. At some time, Andre acquired 160 acres, I think, in Richmond Township, where he and his family, like his father's, became one of the first 3 settlers of that township. He built the first elevator in Lenox and participated in organizing the Macomb County Savings Bank along with several others, including my grandfather, Frank Shaver, whom we visited last year. And fact, Andre was vice president of the bank at the time of his death. His mother, Leah, lived until 1893. On March 19th, 1897, the Yale Expositor reported that Andre sold his farm of 160 acres north of Richmond for $7,000. I don't, what's an acreage out here cost now? 10, 15? If you could buy it? Andre married 3 times. This marker here has 4 sides, one for each for Andre and his 3 wives. They're memorialized here. The first marriage was to Sarah Van Nostrand, who lived from 1840 to 1864. He married her in 1861 and they had 1 child, Ella Gilbert Lovejoy, who was the ancestor of many of the Priestep family from Armada. After Sarah's death in 1864, Andre married Mary Ann East, and I see there's some East over here, presumably some of the same family, I don't know. Mary the old fingers don't work as well as they used to. Mary Ann East Simmons lived from 1846 to 1879, and they had 3 children. Lottie, who was born in 1869 and died at age 20 in 1889. Harry Simmons, right over here somewhere, was born in 1873 and died in 1931. And my grandmother Bessie, who was born in 1876 and died in 1948. When I was 14, 13, something like that. She was a wonderful lady. She made the best fried cakes in the world. Could bake cookies and always had something like that, or homemade dill pickles for her grandsons, whom she called the boys. That was my brother and me. Mary died in 1879 when my grandmother would have been only 3 years old, I guess. And he married Ida Rutter, or Rother, I don't know which it was, from Monroe, Michigan, who lived from 1849 to 1917. No further children left. I don't know how many Priesteps descended from Sarah's daughter Ella, but I do remember my grandparents talking about Sadie Moxley, who had been a Lovejoy, and Marguerite, who were Ella's daughters. Marguerite married a Priestep that we called Bounce. I don't remember his first name, from Armada. They had 4 children, Tom, Jack, Marella, and Priscilla, whom I knew as kids over the years. And maybe some of you knew Jack. I think he was, well, Tom was here too, many years ago. Harry Simmons married May Heath, so the Heaths and the Simmonses joined up. They lived in the red brick house right behind the bank on Monroe Street. They had 4 kids, Walter, Dorothy, Evelyn, and Harriet. Dorothy married R. Stewart Weeks, the son of Melvin and Bertha, so the Weeks and the Simmonses got together. And there were 9 grandchildren from that union, and only one survives is my cousin Marcia Anderson Blacklock, who lives in Berkeley, California. She's the daughter of Harriet Simmons Anderson and is married to a guy named Rodney Blacklock, whose father Charlie is a proponent of the musical Saw. And if you ever want to have your ears tortured, listen to some more music from people playing on the musical Saw. It ain't music, it's horrible. My grandmother Bessie married Frank Hurt. We talked about him last year. They had 4 boys, Paul Stanley Hurt, my dad, Franz, Carl, and Gilbert. They lived in the yellow brick Dutch colonial house right across from the old post office site on Main Street. I think it's got green trim, something like that. But I remember going there every Sunday for years. Of their 4 grandchildren, there's only 2 of us living. My cousin Robert Hurt, Bob Hurt, who's the son of Carl, and he lives in San Jose, California, and myself. And My brother John, or we called him Jake, died 8 years ago, and Bob's sister Mary Elizabeth Hurt Brown Whiteside, whom you may have known because they grew up in Richmond, are deceased, and there are 10 great-grandchildren from all that gang. So back to Andre. He demonstrated the Simmons family prowess, or lack thereof, with the axe in a unique way. I'll share two versions of this event because I love the way the newspapers reported on not so local events as if they were world events, in words and style foreign to us today. And get where these newspapers were. On January 1st, 1907, the Flint Journal. How far is Flint from here? 90 miles? 60? Whatever. Headline, chops wife's finger. Second headline, wealthy Macomb County farmer was trying to behead a turkey. Richmond, Michigan, January 1st, while Andre Simmons, a wealthy retired farmer, was trying to behead a turkey while his wife held its head, he missed his aim and split one of her fingers open with the axe. She had just cautioned him to be careful where he struck, but Bowser-like, he assured her that he knew enough to hit where he was looking. He is one of the directors of the Macomb County Savings Bank and a well-known cattle buyer. The turkey was for a family dinner and reunion for New Year's Day. The next day, on January 3rd, the Saginaw Courier-Herald. Saginaw's even further away than that. Headline, Mrs. Turk chops wife. Spouse cautioned husband as she held gobbler's head. Richmond, Michigan, January 2nd. As Andre Simmons, a wealthy retired farmer, was about to behead a gobbler for the New Year's family dinner, his wife, who was holding the bird's head on the block, cautioned him against striking her hand with the axe. After assuring her that he knew enough to hit where he was looking, he made the stroke, splitting her finger open. The turkey temporarily escaped injury. I have no personal knowledge of this. It's not part of the family lore. I never heard about this until I was doing some research. Maybe it was a little too embarrassing to talk about it. The news must have been sparse that week, for why would those newspapers from Flint and Saginaw report on this incident, which today I don't think probably would even make the littlest article. Probably got a lot of laughs from the local farmers and businessmen chopping. For those of us who are used to treating Sunday as almost just another weekend or weekday, it's hard to believe that being a spectator, much less a player of ball on Sunday, was once illegal. So here we have Andre in another light, convicted of disturbing the peace. As reported in the Flint Journal on September 5th, 1908. Headline, witnesses now arrested. Second headline, gave testimony which convicted Sunday players. Lenox, Michigan, September 5th. Convicted of disturbing the peace by playing ball on Sunday, Herman and Edward Priestep swore out warrants for the arrest of William Hamilton and Andre Simmons on charges of having disturbed the peace by attending the game. The latter were the witnesses on whose testimony the players were convicted. State law provides that those who attend the games are equally guilty with the players. Now, I think Herman Priestep, my dad might have bought a cottage at Orchard Beach in St. Clair from Herman back in 1940. I didn't check that out, but it could very well be because we still own the property. On August 9th, 1909, Andre Simmons died of Bright's disease, which is an outdated medical term, some form of kidney infection. Apparently a lot of people had kidney infections. He died when my father, his oldest grandson, was 6, some 25 years before I was born. So my personal knowledge of Andre is non-existent. It's all from what I was able to glean. His obituary, however, was fairly nicely written by, again, one of the reporters at the time using the language of the day. Mr. Simmons was for many years recognized as one of our consistent, reliable, and conservative businessmen. and his death is to be regarded as a direct loss to the community. In temperament, he was quiet and retiring, and his calm and sure judgment in matters of business gave to all his undertakings the element of solidarity. I mean, sounds like you're talking about the President of the United States or something. And it's recorded that he was a devout Christian, a member of the Congregational Church, and a lifelong Mason. And so, Andre, R.I.P. P.S. A bit of family lore, and I would vehemently, personally deny this. I have never sought to pursue the family rumor that somehow the Simmons family of Richmond is related to one Stephen Simmons, who was the last person executed by hanging in the state of Michigan. He moved to Michigan in 1824 from upstate New York, owned a bar in what is now the city of Wayne. He was a notorious drunk. I think he partook of his own stuff. And when he was in a good drunken rage, he'd go home and beat the heck out of his wife and daughter. One day he beat his wife so bad he killed her. That's why he was hung on September 30th, 1830. 16 years later, the state of Michigan banned the death penalty, and we do not have the death penalty in Michigan anymore. That's it, guys. I had tried to find more than that, but throw a little humor in is all I could do. Thank you.
I'll never look at turkeys again.
Can you imagine? I mean, here's a wife holding the turkey on the block, and he's going at it with an axe. Oh, man.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
You're welcome. My
Our
pleasure.
second stop.
Settled? Okay, looks good. We're all settled.
I like your dress.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In the center? Yep. There you go. Okay.
I'm ready to start?
Yep.
Greetings and welcome to you all. My name is Arthur Kirkham, but you can call me Kirk. I am one of 5 children born to William Kirkham and Ellen Cudworth. They say I love to razz people and speak a lot of hooey, but I don't know why. Some of what we are going to tell you is the God's honest truth, and some of it, well, you'll just have to decide for yourself.
Well, hello. I am Ellen Cudworth Kirkham. And William, I was the wife of William Kirkham. And I settled in Richmond in 1840. Isn't that a long time ago?
Yes.
Okay. And my son Kirk was born in 1853. I'm so proud of him.
Of course you would be.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Ann Reese of Boston. I came to the area to visit friends, and well, I never went back to Boston. We were married in 1875 and raised 4 beautiful children. But Kirk, why are we here?
What do you mean, why are we here? We died. This is a cemetery.
I know this is a cemetery, but this is the Richmond Cemetery, and I worked very hard with the Richmond's Ladies Relief Corps to erect that wonderful Civil War monument right back there. Our graves should be way up in front.
Yep, so far up in front that we would be under that patch of cement they call M19.
With the motor vehicles rolling over us.
That's right. No, I'm just razzing you. When the county planned M19, they moved our graves back away from the proposed road, just to the south of the Civil War monument. You can see our new headstone that our daughter Sybil Marshall and our grandson William Kirkham Marshall had placed. It's quite modern looking.
Yes, but why are we here?
Because it's too dang noisy up front.
Okay. Whoops, there we go. Where are we? Oh! I was looking. Kirk, did they move the babies?
Yes, love. Our baby and little Betty are with us.
Well, I know it's not polite to talk about such things, but you ladies know that some of our precious angels don't stay with us but a short time. But we had Betty for 13 years. Betty was the daughter of our daughter, Ella. Ella married Roy Beebe, and they waited a long time for Betty. She was 30 years old when she had her, and she died in childbirth. So little Betty came to live with us, and our daughter Sybil just loved her.
She sure did. She carried her around just like a living doll. It crushed Sybil when Betty died. She died of a strangled bowel.
I was glad when Sybil met that very nice young insurance salesman from Detroit, Ellsworth Marshall. He put the smiles back on her face. They got married in 1920s, and they had 2 children. They had Peggy, Marshall, Linky, Molin, and William Kirkham Marshall.
I understand they called him Kirk too.
Oh, they sure did.
You know, it was so nice that Sybil got to raise her family in my home on Monroe Street. Do you remember Monroe Street? I enjoyed living in town after William Kirkham died. And the farm on Gratiot was really hard to take care of. It was really tough to handle. I understand the farmhouse is still standing there today in between Richmond and on the way to New Haven, okay? Gratiot, you know, Gratiot. And there is a gazebo just south of the house, and maybe some of you will recognize it because it's still standing there. It's still there when you drive by. There's my husband and I right there, and our kids are out in front. Here, I'll just let you pass. You can pass that around. Okay.
Okay. Thinking of Sybil reminds me of the time she wanted to dress up like Queen Elizabeth with an Elizabethan collar. So she took the tin flute from the stove and stuck her head right through it, which was fine until she tried to get it off and pushed up, and the spikes tightened right under her chin.
You had to go and get the tinsmith to come and cut her out of it. But Kirk, did you have to put her in the front window of your shop for all to see?
Well, it was quite a sight. And all the boys had a great time honoring a visit from the Queen of England.
All the boys, layabouts, you mean? Just so you know, Kirk owned and operated the barber shop in Richmond for 46 years, in between the 1880s and the 1920s. What with a 25-cent haircut, 15-cent shaves and shoe shining, and a 5-pin billiard table, 2 pool tables, 3 penny slot machines, a 1-arm bandit, and Indian dice.
Hold up. Indian dice is the national game of India. You know it as parcheesi.
Oh. There was never a shortage of fellas hanging about. Like I said, layabouts.
What are you talking layabouts? You mean the upstanding businessmen of our community.
Yes, layabouts. Who else would have time to play 5-pin billiards?
I will have you know that 5-pin billiards or pin pool is a game of aristocrats. Shakespeare even talked about the game in his play Antony and Cleopatra. My tonsorial parlor is certainly nothing like the pool halls next to the racetrack. Some say it was the golden age of barbershops. I had palm plants in my front bay window next to plush upholstered barber chairs, positioned just so you could see the post office, the livery station, and the bus stop in front of the commercial house.
It was a very important position to see who just arrived in town, when the post was going to be delivered, and street dog fights and a runaway horse.
When a man came into my parlor, he placed his coat and hat on my antler rack. I would select his gold embossed monogram shaving mug. He would peruse my cigar counter for a smoke of the day, cigar or pipe. Some men would bring a cushion to set on their hardwood chair. My tonsorial parlor was a palace for men to come and relax and work out the important decisions of the day.
Or at least it was. Until those flappers started coming in asking for the bob haircut. In my day, our sisters and our mothers did our hair. I can't imagine going into your tonsorial parlor and getting a haircut. But that bob sure was cute.
See, right here is a picture of my barber shop. And you can see the red barber pole right there. See the gentleman outside. It was on the north corner of Main Street and Monroe, north of the commercial house.
I believe they tore it down to place the PNC Bank or Richmond Bank or one of those banks.
But my tonsorial parlor lives on today. When I retired, I sold it to that nice young Frank Pulls boy. And he moved it across the street and ran it until 1943. In 1945, Leroy Ricks bought it, and the shop is currently operating in Richmond by Leroy's grandson, Matt Ricks. I believe you may get to meet the Rickses today.
That red and white pole reminds me of all the bloodletting and medical things.
Bloodletting? Barbers stopped doing that sort of thing in the early 1800s. Old barbers did do the unsavory jobs of lancing abscesses, pulling teeth, and during the war, they assisted in amputations and setting broken bones. The red and white on the barber pole symbolized blood and bandages. But in my day, other than the occasional odd wound care now and then, I had Doc Waterloo to take care of the rest.
But I wonder though, our son Harold went to medical school at the Detroit School of Medicine. Before opening his practice, Harold decided that he wanted to travel the world. He went to South Africa, Egypt, Italy, and China. The Richmond Review even printed his letters home in the About Town column. But then, he was in Switzerland in 1914, and World War I broke out, and he could not get home to us.
Yes, that was when he decided to join the Army Medical Corps, and he served loyally until his retirement in 1933. He moved home to Detroit and had a practice in Royal Oak until his death in 1949.
Harold used to give music lessons to pay for medical school. He was at home with 12th Street Rag and Rachmaninoff. He was the first pianist for the Alaskan Symphony Orchestra in 1921 in Anchorage, Alaska. He was a captain in the 21st Infantry. We have a copy of the program right over here for later.
I think he got his flair for entertaining right here in my barber shop. What with those cornet band boys always hanging around the barber shop.
The cornet band was all men and played from 1900 to 1920s. They were a fun group of boys, and there was lots of tomfoolery.
And they inspired the women to form their own band in 1914, the Girk Ladies Band, and was the only one of its kind in Richmond, in Michigan. The only one of its kind in Michigan. And they were hanging around for years and years. The cornet band was all men and played from 1900 to 1920s, and they were a fun group with lots of tomfoolery. They inspired the women to form their own band in 1914, the Girk Ladies Band, and was the only one of its kind in Michigan. See the young lady on the far right, the drum major? This is my granddaughter, Sybil.
I got it.
Right here.
Oh! There she
So
is.
right, Ella.
There is Sybil. Oh, I'm so proud of her. They had so much fun.
I always wanted to arrange a battle of the bands.
Harold was inspired by his big brother Roy playing in the cornet band with those boys, Bertie Miller and Warren Stone. But you know, Roy was a good businessman running his mercantile business on North Main Street until 1946. And our granddaughter, Mary Jane Kirkham, went to work for the government in Washington, D.C.
Oh, stop your bragging up our children. What we really should be talking about is the Decoration Day, May 31st, 1920, pin pool tournament that was held in my tonsorial parlor. Here is a reprint.
Here, take one and pass them around.
So that and this is a reprint of the flyer advertised in the Richmond Bellyache, or the Richmond Review if you prefer. Hank Schroeder, a very fine character artist, did the renderings for the famous pin pool tournament poster. We had champions coming from Lenox, Armada, BB's Corners, and Muttonville. And the best prizes: a brown derby hat and a genuine Hemators champion cigar. We had other entertainment from the county's foremost amusers listed here on the poster.
For example, Harry Simmons, the pride of the Cinder Path, will sprint 100 yards around Kirk's pool table.
I swept up all the whiskers off the turns.
Harry must have had the pox. Do you see, when he was young, you see the spots on his face there?
Harry was also the vice president of Macomb Bank and president of the School Board of Education. Married that Heath girl and had 4 kids. He was a partner of Smith and Simmons, selling horse-drawn wagons and carriages.
Gilbert Square Dale Miller, or Bertie, I grew up with our son Roy and played in the cornet band. He became the band director and also a jeweler.
Bert donated the town clock because he was always running late.
Bert will bring his mouth organ and play Home Sweet Home and a few other of the songs from Detroit. Warren Stone also played in the band with Roy and Bertie. Warren was the drum major, and his father formed the first Congregationalist church in Richmond, which is now the Center for the Performing Arts.
Warren, Richmond's celebrated orator, will recite a poem about the obliging young man from Chicago who performed a wonderful trick just to please an old soldier. This recitation is very touching and will be very appropriate for Decoration Day exercises.
Doc Eldon Waterloo, our dentist, will dance the famous McGinty, same as he did when he taught it to Richmond Society up above Lathrop's store. It's a form of square dancing. Charlie Davidson, also his hardware store, sold cream separators and new era farm equipment. He also played in the band with Roy, Bertie, and Warren.
Charlie Davidson, of spiritualistic fame, will perform table tipping, a stunt of 2 3/4 tipping. Charlie Pell, card shark, will not be doing his famous sleight of hand performance. Charlie says he has a cold and therefore will sing instead. He expects to die most any time now. I have made arrangements for him to try right after the pool tournament. Honorable Austin Pease will render that pathetic and thirst-quenching ballad entitled "The Clink of the Ice in the Pitcher." We had some grand times, didn't we?
Oh, yes, we did. And it was sure nice that Sybil and our grandson Kirk fixed up our graves so nicely. I remember when Kirky was a boy. It was a hot summer day, and we were out at our cottage on Anchor Bay. And well, I wanted to go fishing. And Kirky, he thought that that was a bee's knees idea. So the two of us climbed down the ladder on the seawall and got into our little rowboat. You had been gone a long time at this point, and I had become blind. Little Kirky and I fished all day. He would skillfully put the worm on my hook, and then he would direct me where to put my sinker. We fished all day on brown sugar and butter sandwiches for sustenance. It was dusk, and Kirky manned the oars and got us home to shore. Of course, he had to use his shoulder on my bum to help me get up the ladder off the seawall. And then when we got to shore, there was Sybil, madder than a wet hen. And I said, "Don't you scold Kirky. He's perfectly capable of manning those oars. And what does it matter that I'm blind and he is 8 years old?" I am Christine Elizabeth Marshall Howell, and this is my husband, Brian Howell. Lizzie and Kirk are my great-grandparents. Sybil Marshall is my grandmother, and William Kirkham Marshall is my father, who married Lucia Ann Scavarda Marshall, my mother. As I researched Kirk and Lizzie's lives, I worried that I didn't have enough facts. And then I worried that I didn't have enough fiction, because one of the dictums in our family is never spoil a story for the simple element of truth. A very clear aspect for Lizzie and Kirk is they both had a wonderful sense of humor, and they both loved community. And for those of you who remember my father, he had a wonderful sense of humor and he loved community. So I wonder, is that nurture or nature? My father was born 3 years after his grandfather passed away. So is humor the ability to see irony, the ability to have joy in life, to know how to tell a joke, to the ability to remember jokes to tell? Is that a trait that's connected to our DNA? Just like the blue eyes they both had. Thank you very much for your attention today.
Welcome to the cemetery walk, the Living History Cemetery Walk. My name is Rich Weinert, and I'm portraying Clifford Hench. I'm distantly related through cousins and stuff to Marcia and Carol and Janet and Chris. Our mothers were cousins, so it's a special opportunity for me to portray Cliff. I remember him as being a real kind gentleman. He was always present at funerals, of course, and he was just a gracious, calming, wonderful person. He just made you feel at ease and comfortable. So he really fit the role of his occupation greatly, and he served the community just by what he did for a living. So I'll get started here with, I'm going to sit down if you don't mind, so I can everybody, can you hear me okay? I'll try to talk loud. How's it going so far? Everybody doing a good job?
Yes.
That's good. There's a test. The mayor's giving a test at the end. Picture from Cliff's obituary. I was born March 15th, 1908. On a farm in Lenox, Michigan, just a bit west of town on Division Road. My family moved to Memphis, where I attended country school, and eventually we moved to Richmond, where I graduated from Richmond High School in 1925. In the Echo, if you're all familiar with the Richmond High School Echo, Cliff was the picture editor of the Echo, and he's, I think, right here on this composite picture, 1925, and under his name it says "A Man in the Making," which was pretty smart. I mean, at that time, he turned out to be a pretty good gentleman. He played baseball, and in the Echo, they had some things that he liked to do. His favorite thing to do was mix chemicals. And his favorite literature was Lessons in Undertaking. So he must have already been working at the Friday funeral home at that time. I've got a little something else here. He also had his favorite song. And I found this on YouTube, so it might sound, it's not me singing and it's not Cliff singing. It's just someone singing.
Hey everybody, welcome to another camp song video. Today's camp song video right now will be a classic song, some to the tune of the classic church hymn, Nero My God to Thee, called Nero My...
Oh. Well, that didn't work out so well. Let me try this again. It's Nero, my dog has fleas. So let's see what the... So I thought that was kind of a nice example. He must have had quite a sense of humor. During school, I had a job at Denton's drugstore in town as a clerk and soda jerk. Lots of my friends would come in and have refreshments at the soda fountain. Denton's was the store that was Rasmussen's Drugs in the 50s and 60s, and it's now the Sew Together Quilt Shop. I didn't like working in the drugstore so much because I was inside all the time, and I wanted something I could do outdoors. A friend of mine came in and said he was working with William J. Friday at the time, and he wanted to leave. And he added that he had just come from delivering some furniture out in Columbus Township. That sounded good to me, so I applied for the job and got it. After graduating, I worked at Friday's full time. Friday had a thriving furniture store. It was in the building that now houses Simmons Financial. And it was Dingle's Menswear in the 60s. And has also country real estate in there. The furniture store was downstairs, and the coffin samples were upstairs. In the early days, all the funerals were held in homes or churches. The embalming was done at the deceased home, and the person was laid out at the home until the time of burial or movement to the church. The funeral director went to the home several times each day before the funeral and became well acquainted with the families in different homes. One of the things in a lot of houses from that early era was the coffin door. On a porch with a wraparound porch, there's like an extra door that some say, I don't know if this is the true architectural fact, but it was helpful in bringing in and out the casket.
So it's extra wide then.
Well, yeah, I guess it just they made it so that it was easier to get in and out. Houses in the early years didn't have house numbers, but I knew a lot of the homes because of the furniture deliveries I made in the area. In 1925, Richmond had a population of 1,500, and I knew everybody in town and could call them by name. If you didn't know somebody by name, you at least knew somebody who knew them. Now people many times die in hospitals, and their relatives come to the funeral home, and you never get to the homes, which is sad. Since I started working at Fridays at 17, I had the required 2 years of apprenticeship by the age of 19. But I couldn't take the state board exam to get my license until I was 21 in 1930. The history of embalming began in ancient Egypt around 2600 BC for religious reasons related to the afterlife, evolving into complex mummification. Modern arterial embalming developed in the 17th and 18th centuries in Europe with scientific discoveries, particularly William Harvey's experiments. In practice, significant advances in the United States during the Civil War with Dr. Thomas Holmes and the use of formaldehyde, driven by the need to return fallen soldiers to their families for funeral services. I married my wife, Marguerite Foster, on May 31st, 1938. We lived on Forest Street in this house here. You can almost smell the cookies being baked in there. And they say that behind every successful man is an amazing woman. Well, I was truly blessed. My wife Marguerite was born January 16th, 1914 in Richmond to the late Ingram and Gertrude Weeks Foster. Marguerite graduated from Richmond High School in 1932 and attended Michigan State University for 1 year. In addition to raising our 4 girls, helping with her mother's care, she was a kind, loving, and giving woman. She was a longtime member of the First United Church of Christ, the Ladies' Aid, Diversity Club, Potluck Club, former Girl Scout leader, taught 4-H, and was a volunteer for the American Red Cross blood drive. This is me talking now. I once stopped by our church, and this is probably in the 80s or 90s, and found Marguerite on her hands and knees in the boiler room painting the floor. Marguerite passed away at the age of 96 on September 9, 2010. When Mr. Friday retired in 1941, I had been working with him for 16 years. Friday closed his furniture business, and I was able to buy the funeral business from him, which had been known as Friday and Hench. In the early days in the profession of funeral directing, sometimes a horse and buggy had to be used to get to the homes located down muddy country roads. I moved the funeral business to the corner of Priestep and Main Street and opened it as Hench Memorial Chapel Funeral Home. When I started the new funeral home, our first child, Carol, was just 6 months old, and we didn't live above the funeral home like most funeral directors did at the time, so we didn't have to worry about some child crying that might disturb a funeral service. Being a funeral director is a one-man operation, and sometimes it means you're on call 24 hours a day. But I did find time to be with my family, and we raised 4 beautiful girls, Carol, Christine, Janet, and Marcia, 3 of which are here. So they're going to fact check me at the end of this. One of the, and I kind of remember there being all kinds of things, but I came across this little item on the internet is a little memento Clifford D. Hench must have gave out at the funeral home to people. And anybody have any idea what that might be? It's a sewing kit. Isn't that cool? And then a lot of the funerals, of course, happened in churches, and often in the summer when it was really hot and they couldn't afford air conditioning, so they had these flappers. I found this at our church yesterday. It says Hench Memorial Chapel, and it's been well used, obviously, but it's another very nice thing to share from his church. Our family also had the privilege to spend time at our summer cottage on Lake Huron, north of Port Huron. A great place for swimming and relaxing, and we had a boat and often took the girls water skiing. One thing I learned about being a funeral director is that you have to be a good listener. Part of the therapy of grief is to have someone to listen to you, to let you unload. It's just being there when you are needed. The biggest reward is the satisfaction of feeling that you helped the family through a difficult time. There would be times that would get me down. The grief of the families, especially those who lost small children, was difficult. It's a way of life, and old people die. That you can accept. When I had children of my own, I began to wonder more times than I'd like to admit. I would say, I'm going out for a while, and I would take off and just drive to think and get my head on straight. A lot of this stuff is from an interview when he retired, so it's kind of verbatim, but it was very helpful. We also had a horse called Betty. We kept her in a barn just north of the Good Old Days barn. I'm not saying I would talk to her, but she gave me a little of my farm life back. The girls would ride her over there. A story I never talked about too much was after the 1953 tornado in Flint. 109 people died. Some of the area funeral directors were called in to help prepare the many bodies that were killed by the tornado. There was a lot of death and destruction. We had one of the first on-call ambulances in the area after World War II. Often one of my assistants lived up over the funeral home, which helped when there was an ambulance call. One of them was Henry Brinker during high school, who later became a pastor. I once offered a job to our nephew, Dave Foster. This is a story that Sue Foster shared with me. He was great at interacting with the families who had lost a loved one. But one time he went down the stairs. When he hit the bottom step, he saw something that kind of caused him to twirl around and run back upstairs. That was the end of David's funeral home career. Times changed, you can imagine, with what people went through in the early days, and with a casket in the corner of their living room for 3 days. Even with funeral homes, they often had 3 days of visitation and then the funeral. That's a long time to go through that. Thank God for mints. You always have to travel with some mints. I left the candy there, so you're welcome to have some mints. I sold the funeral home in 1964 and stayed on to help the new owners until 1968 when I retired. They kept the Hench name on the business for many years, but I was no longer associated with it. I came out of retirement and worked as a salesman at Heath International for 5 years selling snowmobiles. I don't know if you remember, Richmond was kind of the center for snowmobiles, Ski-Doo snowmobiles. And then in 1974 I came out of retirement and again to work for Conger Funeral Home, which eventually became Rewalt Funeral Home, and I was participating in their services, which was my first love. I could still be involved, but have more freedom to enjoy our family and travel. Along the way, I was a member of our church council, our church men's club. I was a Mason, a member of the Rotary Club and Chamber of Commerce. In 1980, I was honored for 50 years of service by the Michigan Funeral Directors Association. The ceremony was in Traverse City, and he told the interviewer that it's a long way to go, but they had a great free lunch. Take a few minutes to look around here at the Richmond Cemetery. It was established in 1850. That's 175 years ago. And I did like the simple math because I'm not a very good mathematician, but there's records of 6,000 burials, I guess, in the cemetery. So that averages like 35 a year. That's a lot of funerals, and Cliff Hinch, I'm sure, was very honored to be part of bringing some peace and rest to the many folks who were buried here and giving comfort to the families. They all are cherished by those who follow them. One last thing, there's a Civil War memorial that was established by the Women's Relief Corps and Henry G. Beebe for the Union soldiers between 1861 and 1865, and it was dedicated on October 20th, 1894. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Well, we're not reenactors. We're going to tell you the story of our parents, Barb and Leroy Ricks. We're going to try to stay to script. There's so much that they did. As you'll see afterwards, you can take a look at everything that we have here. It's the tip of the iceberg, what they were involved in and whatnot, but we thought we'd bring some of this stuff out. But we're grateful and honored to be here today to tell the story of the two of them. My daughter Rachel is sharing with you the life of my mother, and I will be sharing the life of my father, of course. We wanted to tell the story together, not as individuals, because they lived their lives like partners, side by side. They were married 58 years before my mother passed. Their lives were intertwined, and they were each other's best friends and their biggest supporters. So Leroy Herman Ricks, my father, was born on October 8, 1923. He was born to Elroy and Edna Schubert Ricks. He was the oldest of 8 children. He was born on a farmhouse right out here on 33 Mile Road, and attended the one-room schoolhouse that is now over in Bailey Park, which was the school section schoolhouse. He delivered milk for Houston Dairy, which was over on, over here on across from Ray Swift Pond, at the top of the hill. He delivered that milk before he went to school in the morning to make money for the family. He also used to set the pins at Bailey's Bowling Alley, which is now the barber shop at the north end of town here. He also worked at Miller Coal. We're not sure what he did there, but he had it listed that he worked there at Miller Coal. I imagine he probably helped deliver the coal back in those days to the homes. And he had to go on from there to take on greater responsibilities and help raising the 7 siblings that he had when his father had left the family. Left his mother to raise and support them alone. He became the man of the house, basically, back in those days. Not a lot of time to be a kid. He had to work those jobs to help, and eventually they moved in just down here on North Main Street to Uncle John Ricks, which would have been his father's brother. He never really knew his father at all. He had left, as far as we can tell, probably sometime early 30s. He had left the family and moved on. Rachel?
So Barbara Anzared was born on February 26, 1926 in Detroit in a small hospital that her uncle actually owned at the time. Her parents were Walter Zared and Marjorie Mildred Snover. They called her Mame. She had an older brother, Robert, and eventually would have younger twin siblings, Ruth and Richard. They lived for a short time up in High Banks, but then were in the Richmond area. Oddly enough, her father also left the family, like my grandfather's, and so Mame moved in with her father and brother on a farm out on 34 Mile Road. My grandma's Uncle Joe that they lived with was a bachelor and had no children of his own, but he stepped up and helped his sister to raise 4 very young children at the time. May went to work for Dr. Ingalls and did her best to help with the family. Grandma really enjoyed her life on the farm and spoke fondly about it over the years, but unfortunately life took a tragic turn when May passed away in 1936 at only 35 years of age from cervical cancer, so it left Grandma and her siblings orphaned. She was only 10 when she lost her mom, and I think it impacted her whole life. But Uncle Joe took guardianship of the children and continued to raise them on the farm, and we as a family, there are 6 members of our family that have Joseph as a middle name and have honored what he did for Grandma and her siblings. Grandma and Grandpa's lives would cross when they both attended Richmond High School, and it was then located over on Park and Grove. Grandpa was older than Grandma, he the quiet, shy senior, she was the outgoing freshman. He was involved in school activities like members of the basketball team, played the bass, drum in the band. She was very involved. We have so many things that she was involved in her yearbooks, many clubs, organizations like student government, home economics, glee club, and she was even editor of the Echo. As she described it to us, it was a fateful study hall class during her freshman year that she laid eyes on him and a very quick crush formed. She got the courage to trip him in class one day as he was walking back to his seat, and when he asked her why, she simply looked and said, "I wanted your attention." It did not work right away though.
No, it didn't work right away, but it would. Dad would ignore her for the next few months until he graduated from Richmond High. Then in that winter of 41, their paths crossed again up here at Ray Swift Pond during the skating, and their romance blossomed from there. That's where their love story actually began. But it soon would be interrupted by the bombing, of course, at Pearl Harbor in December of 41. And, tough times. Dad and his future brother-in-law, my Uncle Bob Zared, along with a few other friends, drove down to Battle Creek to enlist into the Army. That was in October of 42. By then, Mom and Dad were sweethearts, with even my mother stating in her yearbook that her secret ambition was to become a member of the Ricks family. Dad would leave for the Army in December of 42. He would eventually be sent to Fort Knox, Kentucky. We have a item here that he got while he was in Fort Knox, and it's a sweetheart flag is what it's called. And we found that amongst all the things that they had collected over the years. I should say my mother collected over the years. He spent his time working as a medic and giving vaccinations to the soldiers that needed them. During that time, he contracted pneumonia. He had bed rest. He contracted pneumonia 2 more times after that, all while being at Fort Knox. He ended up with rheumatic fever. And in December of 43, they gave him an honorable discharge, and he, of course, came back to Richmond.
So while Grandpa was in the Army, Grandma would write to him every day, even more than her own brother Bob or her younger brother when he joined. She became active in the support on the home front like so many other young women did during that time. Many female students from Richmond High School went out to farms in the area to help with crops. She specifically talked about the sugar beets that she would help with at Ramsey Farm. They would bus them over to Ramsey Farm. She helped with the American Red Cross blood drive, something she would be involved in for many, many, many years. She became a telephone operator. So I loved this. The good thing for Grandma was that many of the calls that the operators were put out were military calls. So she would have Grandpa go to a specific payphone at a certain time so that she could call him and they could speak together. So she kind of took advantage of that telephone operator role she had. But they both played their part, and they were both very proud of the service that they gave to the country during their time of war.
When Dad did get home from the Army, they were reunited and began their life together. Dad would go into Green Barber School, which is in downtown Detroit, to begin his lifelong career as a barber. After he graduated, he worked for Frank Paltz in the barbershop that is where Overflow Cafe is now on the north end of town. He would eventually move down to the current location where my son, Matthew, has the barber shop. I think that was in 1965. That was the old bowling alley, the Bailey Bowling Alley. And he and Jerry Gramzo bought that together and created L&J Enterprise. And I remember we would go in there and gut it all out. And my Uncle Bob Zared was a carpenter in Richmond. He went and rebuilt that place. So my son still has that business there today. While working at the barbershop, Dad joined the Richmond Volunteer Fire Department in 1944. He officially became a member in 1944. The story was when he was 17 years old, he would go to fires. There was no real organization. So he had a lot more than much earlier than the 1944. But other things came, the war came and everything else. We do have some documents here, I believe, possibly some clippings from the newspapers. The newspapers love to get a picture of him when the fire whistle would blow off. He'd take off. Whether he was doing a haircut, a shave, or whatever he was doing, he would just take off. And I think there's one here that even shows him, maybe. I don't know if that's out, Ray.
I think it's in the chapel.
It was blowing. It could be in
the chapel.
The chapel now, because it was blowing a little bit earlier and we couldn't put stuff up. But it shows him in his normal smock that he wore as a barber. All barbers used to wear in the old days. So he's holding a hose, putting out a fire in town. It was not unusual to see that happen in the local papers, and it wasn't unusual for many a person to get stuck in the chair.
So Grandma would eventually stop working for the telephone company and go to work for the Wright's department store over that was on North Main at the time. But on September 15th, 1945, they were married in the First United Methodist Church. They had a large wedding for that time where they had over 200 guests attending. Their reception was held at the Cook Hotel. And we have some great pictures from that day from inside the hotel eating their cakes. But their reception was celebrated. They would move into the first apartment, which was above the barber shop on Main Street. She would go to work at Wright's until they were blessed with their first son, my Uncle Tom, on July 25th, 1949. She would then stay home to raise their son, but her community service and volunteerism was always part of her life and always important. On March 9th, 1953, their second son, my dad Tim, would be born. And on the very same day, they would buy the house that they would live in until their passing on Parker Street that now my cousin and his wife still live in. The house was previously owned by Herman Ricks, which would have been my grandpa's grandfather's house. Grandma would stay home raising the boys until Tim and Tom were in their teens. She was even voted Mother of the Year by the Lions Club one year, which she was very proud of. She then went on to work for her brother Bob, who owned the flower shop in town. She would go on to work for Lori Welch when Lori Welch bought the flower shop. She loved flowers, especially gardenias, so she worked at the shop until her health did not allow her to work anymore.
So let's move on to what made them recognizable names in our community. Their story extends well beyond their personal lives, with recognizing how they invested their time, talents, and energy into the community that they so love. From volunteering and supporting local organizations to taking active roles in the village and then the city politics, Mom and Dad consistently demonstrated a commitment to giving back and strengthening the place that they and their family called home.
So I'll start with Grandma because we know that Grandpa's accomplishments were probably more recognized over the years, but my grandma had a very impressive life given to service as well. So she stayed home, and being a mom to Tom and Tim was to her the most important role. She dedicated many years to different organizations. She was a Sunday school at the United Methodist Church here in town. She was a den mother for her son's Boy Scout troop. She was a member of Eta Zeta Pi, Church Women United, American Cancer Society, and she was even a trustee on the Michigan Cancer Foundation. She served as secretary for the American Legion Auxiliary. She supported her husband and all his fellow firefighters as a member of the Richmond Fire Department Lady Auxiliary. From that time she was in high school until even the late 1990s, she served the American Red Cross in many capacities, especially through her work with the blood banks, where her efforts supported countless lives. Her great-granddaughter Ella would go on to run them when she was in high school too, as a nod to Grandma. Some people might remember her as the Stamp Lady, where she sold stamps at the schools to raise money for the war, and then she continued to sell them even after, as they began then calling them the U.S. Savings Bond. People knew her well, talk about her unwavering kindness and thoughtfulness. She was known to bring a casserole or a plate of cookies over to someone that needed a kind gesture, or someone was having a hard time. My grandparents also became guardians for a recluse that lived above Main Street, above where the sewing shop is now. Her name was Edna Kennedy. Grandma would visit her daily, ensure she had groceries, maybe watch television or just play cards with her. And of course, she introduced her to our family, and Mrs. Kennedy became family. When the time came, they insured and paid for so that Mrs. Kennedy would have a proper burial and funeral. Grandma always made sure that there were fresh flowers on the graves of family members who had passed and came to water them on Sundays, often bringing along a child or two, or then a grandchild or two. She put others before herself in so many ways. I often refer to her, and I mean that she was a true angel on earth. She saw the best in everyone and made each person she talked to feel special and seen. Her motto, and it was a sticker in the house, said, "Share a random act of kindness every day," and she lived that motto.
Where do I begin with my dad's contributions? We could be here an awfully long time. We have 20 minutes, I was told, so we're going to run through this. Reading many of the back articles that were saved, and some that we have with us today, and not knowing what the gravestone here says on the back side. His contributions to the city and the people of the city, he deserved the recognition. Let's start with outside the politics first here. He was an American Legion commander here in Richmond for many, many years, and spent 60 years as a volunteer fireman on the fire department, where he served as chief. He also served as a chief for the Blue Water Firemen's Association. He was president there. He's also enshrined at the Michigan Firefighter Memorial in Roscommon with his good friend Jack Smith. He was a member of the Richmond Chamber of Commerce since the 1940s, served as president 4 different times, and I don't remember a time when he didn't put up and take down the Christmas decorations on Main Street, sometimes with just himself putting them up when nobody else would help. He'd make sure those decorations got up. We tried to get him to stop doing it, and he finally had to eventually, but he did it until he was very old at the time. He owned Rick's Barbershop for 50 years, where you could find him for a haircut. He was great at jokes. He could tell jokes for 3 days in a row if you wanted him to. Or you could find him sitting in the chair conducting city business. Even if he wasn't on city council, city managers used to come in there every morning and talk to him. Various city managers throughout the years would come in because he had the barbershop. He heard what was going on. He knew what the people wanted to see happen. And he was very astute in politics too, small town politics. He was a Memorial Day ceremony chairman for 50 years. I remember the one time that he didn't make it, he had somebody stand in. He still planned it all, but it was when my brother was sent to Vietnam. He met him in Indianapolis. He was a past member of the Richmond Rotary, and he was actually the first president of the Richmond PTA. And that was back in the 50s probably. He was a chief umpire for the Richmond Little League for 10 years. And he was the hardest on his sons when we played for him. He was also a Mason in the Richmond Masonic Lodge. He served many years on the Board of Trustees at the Methodist Church here in town, often chairing those meetings. He supported my mom in volunteering for the American Red Cross, always carried the tables and the chairs, and quite often got a lot of the firemen would help along with that every single year. He served on boards that supported what he loved doing and what little free time he did allow himself. One of them included the Michigan Bow Hunters Association. He was a broker for Trend Realty, and when Trend closed, he later worked for Country Realty. It was a side job that he had along with his full-time barbering. We have a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier over here in the first part of the cemetery. He and my Uncle Jerry Habel. Jerry was the commander at the VFW, and Dad was commander at the, what do I want to say? Pardon me?
American Legion.
Yeah, American Legion. And they worked together, and they had that moved so it wasn't so close to the road. They also put up a new, I think there's a picture of it here, they put up a new monument recognizing those that served. He was definitely a founding member of the Richmond Good Old Days Festival. He was the first chairman of the festival, and he sat on the board as a director for many, many years until he said, "You've done enough. You don't need me anymore." And he hung on for a couple more years, and then he said, "No, you really don't need me anymore." And my mother got sick, and so he couldn't help any longer. But he was always a great source for us to go back to. And today, I mean, the pride that he gave to us at that time. Today, we have we have 4 generations actually that help run the Good Old Days Festival, in which we all really enjoy and feel it's very important for our community to have that time. Mom and Dad were selected as the Grand Marshals of the Grand Parade in 1988, something that they were very, very proud of. And I think we have a picture of that also somewhere on a plaque over here. When people think of Leroy Ricks, they are sure to think of his role in city government. He got his first start in politics when village president Frank Paltz, who was a barber, assigned him to a committee to evaluate a new dispatch system for the police and fire departments. There's a lot of good stories on that too, how they used to get their calls, the police and you never knew. If somebody stayed late, well, they were the switchboard that day. It was funny to read the stories about it. He got attracted to politics at that time. In 1956, he was appointed to the village caucus. I'm not sure what that was back in those days, the village caucus. We didn't have time to look that up, but it seems to me some people were brought together to try to come up with a slate of people to run for the village council. And of course in 1958, 2 years later, he was appointed the village president. It says he was appointed, so I don't know if he was elected. I'm not sure how that went, but somehow he became the village president in 1958. That was his first role. In 1960, he started to get the village of Richmond to become a home rule city. I have documents where he did the pros and cons of staying in a village or being a city. And the city outweighed staying a village and paying double taxes to the townships and to the village and everything else. And he really pushed that very, very hard. And it finally took 2 votes in the community, and on the second vote, 5 years later, it passed and we became a city and incorporated what we called Lenox at the time, which would be from St. Michael's Cemetery back this way to Division. That became part of the city at that time. He would later be the lead negotiator with Lenox Township to annex the area known as Muttonville, which would be south of the St. A's Cemetery down there, St. Michael's. They needed water and sewer awful bad, and we weren't going to just give it to them. And it was illegal to collect a money that, in lieu of taxes, they called it. That was ruled illegal. So he felt the city residents were subsidizing those people down in Muttonville, and he didn't see any sense to that. And he saw the growth that was down there, so he worked out a deal. I, as mayor, ran into that same attorney that represented Lenox Township at that time. About 10 years ago, I ran into this guy, and we were talking about some other business between Lenox and Richmond. I think it was an extension of this original agreement is what it was. And he said, "Ricks," he said, "you're not Leroy's boy, are you?" And I said, "I am." He goes, "I would have never played poker with that guy. He knew exactly how to negotiate. He was the best negotiator I ever ran across." So I got a kick out of that. Beginning in July of '66, he served on city council. He would complete terms off and on. He would run, he wouldn't run. When he wouldn't run, he would run certain things in the community. The parking lot was a major thing he wanted to see happen. He was told MDOT was going to take parking off of Main Street in the future because they want this as a main run up to 69. And he just felt it was necessary to do that. He walked from one end of town to down where Ball Equipment is now. It used to be a car dealership, Fruin car dealership. He walked that, got everybody to kick in $200 for over a 5-year period, and went back to city council and said, "Here's your down payment, buy that property." And today we have that municipal parking lot that, thank God, we have. They never took off the parking off of Main Street, but certainly the businesses have been able to use that now. And the city is using it also for events on occasion. He advocated for the building of the city pool. 2 good friends of mine died in a tragic accident, and he, I believe, was mayor at the time when that happened. Of course, he was on the fire department. He was part of the group that went out to find the boys, and he pushed for that city pool. He developed a committee and pushed for it, and you know, we still have a beautiful pool today that a lot of other communities just don't have. He was instrumental in purchasing the 11.5 acres where the festival grounds are now for the good old days. That is it's owned by the city technically. Good Old Days Festival paid for half of it. The city paid for half of it. The festival has a home because it got moved around quite a few times. We've been able to grow immensely since then, but it also has added 11.5 acres to the park system also the rest of the year. So it was a good move, and it was the right price at the time also. He was supervisor of the Macomb County Board of Supervisors back then when they weren't commissioners, they were supervisors. He served on that for a number of years. There are so many other articles of all the service that he provided for the city of Richmond over the years, committees, whatnot. And I think my mom cut out and saved every single article that was ever in the old review there, and even into the newer years in the boys. In 1991, he said that was enough. He had served for many, many years. He said the key to his involvement at the time was the support of his wife, Barb. He served our community for over 6 decades in so many different ways. The story of our community can't be told without his handprints all over it. He was honored with many awards, but most notable, and he wasn't a member at the time, I always thought was interesting, but he received the Paul Harris Fellowship Rotary Award, a very prestigious award that he received from the Rotary. He also received various proclamations and resolutions from the County Board of Commissioners for his services over the years, and also from the state of Michigan over the years. Right?
So when life slowed down finally for Grandma and Grandpa, though slowing down might be kind of a stretch, they had been blessed with 2 daughter-in-laws, Glenda and Lori, and they're actually both here, with 5 grandchildren, Mike, Mark, Jennifer, Matt, and myself. They were both alive to see 2 of their great-grandchildren, Chase and Cole, who they absolutely adored, but now they watch from above over a total of 11 great-grandchildren. In retirement, they enjoyed traveling together, especially trips to Hawaii and Florida. Grandma loved to tan. They took their entire family to Florida twice. The second time was for their 40th wedding anniversary and included places like Disney World, Circus World, because Grandma loved the clowns, time at the beach, and it became a vacation remember, because I will say it became a series of unfortunate events. Even at one point, my grandpa's shorts catching on fire when the motorhome broke down. But the memories were made, and it's still things that we talk about it. They had dinners and luncheons with their good friends. They loved relationships with so many lifelong friends. They enjoyed card groups and social groups. Grandpa had a lifelong love of bowling, even was on TV once for bowling, golf, and motorcycling. He was an avid hunter and enjoyed his boys' trip up to the Hale area, where he would take my dad, uncle, and cousins, and I think my brother was able to go once. Girls weren't allowed, of course. But my grandma loved playing bridge, bowling, and other card games. So she loved Jeopardy, and I promised that she could have taken down Ken Jennings with her ability to answer questions. She just had this brain that knew so much different trivia. But she loved taking her grandchildren to Dairy Queen on Sundays, and we would get mail and a stick of gum every now and then as a surprise. She adored her grandchildren and made each of us feel very special. For her, though, Christmas was a favorite holiday, and she planned and saved all year to make it a special time. We knew that maybe growing up, Christmases may have not been what she wanted to see for herself or for her siblings, so she always made sure Christmas was special. They found time to go to their grandchildren's sporting events, both local and even if they had to travel far. They were dedicated fans of any activity or sporting event that a grandchild participated in. I will just say that they loved the family fiercely. They included their extended family of nieces, nephews, cousins, sisters, brothers. Always made time to make memories and to show us that we were loved. So Grandma was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and although she struggled silently for many, many years, my grandpa remained her very devoted caregiver. His love and dedication to her were evident to anyone who knew them. She passed away on November 30th, 2003, and after her passing, Grandpa found comfort in senior bowling and spending time with family and friends, even as he then faced his own battle with leukemia. On May 14th, 2005, less than 2 years after losing Grandma, he was reunited with his beloved wife. His funeral drew hundreds, and leaders from different communities. Main Street was closed and was lined with fire trucks, ladder trucks from surrounding communities. It was truly a moving tribute and a lasting symbol of the respect for the man who had given so much to this place. People stood along the streets and waved little American flags. It was touching and something as if his family we know will never forget.
Grit. I dropped Grandma. That kind of ends our story, their story. We're grateful to have shared that story about Mom and Dad with you today. Our pride comes not only from what they accomplished through their civic duty and volunteer service, but also from their character and what kind of people they were in their everyday life, especially after the challenges they both faced in their childhoods. Their example continues to shape who we are and inspire us to live with the same values. On the back of the gravestone here, it says, "Let the work I've done speak for me." Totally appropriate. Both of my parents lived lives of family and service, not for recognition or awards, but to make a difference and to give back to the community they loved. We hope that their story leaves you with the same inspiration it has given us. Again, thanks so much for being here and listening to their story.